Some Sundays I forget to notice what we are doing here, how it is both as ordinary as going to work or going to school, and also completely astonishing. It's a group of people gathered hoping to transform ourselves and to transform the world. Humans have been gathering in community for religious rituals and worship for millennia, and yet each group that gathers, each time they and we gather in a particular place and time at a particular moment in history with a particular set of people in a combination that is always new. And so it is that religions evolve, impacted by and having an impact on the cultures and communities in which they exist. Unitarian Universalism is a non-creedal faith. As Reverend Lisa Ward wrote, a covenant is not a definition of a relationship. And I'll add here, it's not a statement of belief. It is the framework for our relating. A covenant leaves room for chance and change. It is humble towards evolution. It claims, I will abide with you in this common endeavor. Be present as best I can in our becoming. This calls for a level of trust, courage, and sacrifice that needs to be nurtured, renewed, and affirmed on a regular basis. And so in this final service for November, where we are considering the path of change, it seems fitting to consider our changing, evolving faith, both for this congregation and for Unitarian Universalism as a larger whole. Oh, we've got more than one kid. Some of them are. There's also kids in the nursery. So our time for all ages today, on our hymnal, it says, singing the living tradition. And I expect that you all know what singing is. And I wanted to make sure that kids and adults who could use a little review know what we mean by a living tradition. Let's start with a tradition. We just had Thanksgiving. There's lots of traditions around Thanksgiving. What is a tradition? Do you have, yeah?
It's like something that you do like many times the same time, like every year.
It's something you do many times the same way every year. Yes, it's something that stays the same over time that we repeat, and it reminds us, it sort of connects us to, like, I felt connected to my mother and my grandmother when I was cooking Thanksgiving dinner because we made things that I ate with them, even though both of them are now dead. I felt like they were with me because I was carrying on that family tradition. Now, how about living? Yeah?
Not dead.
Not dead, yes. That is spot on, not dead. Anyone want to give me something more about how you can tell something is living and not dead? How can you tell if something is alive?
It grows and changes and reproduces.
It grows, it changes, it reproduces. Yeah, things that are living generally don't stay the same. So that's an interesting thing, seeing the living tradition. Living is things that don't stay the same, and tradition is things that do stay the same. We're going to be talking more about that, but that's what I wanted to point out in our Time for All Ages. Now, we have a song that we sing. Do you know the hand motions? Kind of. You want to help me? And we'll sing. And today, we're not having Children's Village today. I'm just going to sing you back to your seats. So, and you can change seats if you want, but you can all change seats now too. Great thing about music like that is it doesn't matter what I preach. They brought you to church. Thank you. So when I was a teenager, my grandfather who used to tell us, sit up, you'll get round shoulders, and would sometimes send back a thank you letter with spelling corrections. That grandfather. He sent me a sermon on change when I was a teenager that was written by his, I think, Presbyterian minister. And I wish I still had it. Who knew I was going to grow up to be a minister myself eventually? And I would love to read that sermon now. What I remember as a teenager was thinking, I don't know about this, because it really was suggesting that change was something we should be suspicious of. Change was something we didn't want to rush right into. Change, yeah. It's more about the tradition. And that what I mentioned in the Time for All Ages about the tension between the living and the tradition is part of what makes Unitarian Universalism a little difficult sometimes. And it's what can get us a little in conflict with one another when some people want to change like this, and other people are like, no, what about like that? And other people are like, no, we got this. I feel comfortable the way things are right now. It's a kind of a setup. And it's also what I love about this faith, because this faith challenges me, and I think challenges us, to grow in ways that we can't necessarily predict, and that just, it's opened my life to all kinds of things that I would never have expected. I remember some years ago listening to the then settled minister, Marcel Duhamel, arguing, somebody had come in from the street, I guess, and was arguing chapter and verse with him about why homosexuality was a sin. This was in the nursery. I was dropping my child off at the nursery, and he was good. He could go chapter and verse back, and he's like, "Why are you wearing mixed fabric, mixed fibers? That's also not biblical." But I also have heard colleagues say, and he was very supportive. He wanted this church to go through the welcoming congregation process. I believe this flag, little banner, arrived during his ministry. The first edition, yes. It needed to be updated. It's been there long enough that the first one faded, and I don't know. Linda, if you're online, Linda Williams made us a fresh one because the old one was getting sad looking. And now we have outside our front door not just a pride flag, but also a trans pride flag. And who knows, we'll probably update. I don't think we've updated to is it Philadelphia pride flag that has all kinds of colors to include people of color, and just the wide diversity of sexuality and gender identities that we now in our churches talk about and accept among us. And my first inkling that I was going to be called to do that two and responsible search for truth and meaning was when I heard a colleague say, I absolutely support gay marriage, but two people, that's it. And I was like, well, wait a minute. If I am going to really respect people for who they say they are, and people come to me and tell me that their happiest family has more than two adults in it who are in romantic relationships, why do I get to say, no, two? God said it was two. I don't know who said it was two. Actually, in the Bible, it's more than two a lot of the time. And, I don't have to be in a polyamorous relationship if that's not comfortable for me. And so that was my first, wow. Because it used to make me uncomfortable. There were polyamory ads in the back of UU World, and I was like, I don't know about that. And now I'm like, yeah, I do know about that. That's, not for me to decide. Not for me to decide. And the reason I'm bringing this up in this way, I'm working slowly around to the question of pronouns. Because this is a change that we are being asked to make that I know makes a lot of us uncomfortable. And I've heard objections, they is plural. So I can't possibly make that adjustment. To which I'm going to say, of course you can. Think of all the words that didn't exist when we were young. Okay. And even the young people, I'm sure there's words that exist when they weren't born. Even the smallest young person who I think went to the nursery. Language is changing all the time. We absolutely can do this. When people tell us what their pronouns are, why fight that? Somebody brought up to me the point, well, what if I don't know? What if all these choices make me really uncomfortable because I've been sort of forced to choose and I've chosen, and now I'm not sure I chose what feels authentic, but I don't want to talk about it in public. Alrighty then. Don't talk about it in public. So the invitation that I want to make to all of you is when someone tells you what their pronouns are, don't argue. When you make a mistake, and I do it all the time, say, oh, and I hope someone will correct me, and I'll say, thank you. I meant they. I meant je. I meant zer. We can do this. It's not hard. So the staff has talked about it. We did, I think pre-COVID, we had name baskets where you could put your name for the pronouns you wanted to get on your name tag, and we feel like we've dropped that ball a little bit. So we will be offering that again in the new year, the opportunity to update your name tag with your pronouns. And for those of us who are comfortable with the pronouns we were assigned at birth, by just naming what our pronouns are, we make it easier for someone else. So that's my rant about that. Because we are a living tradition. Thank you. There's some other things I want to talk about, though. There's a big change afoot for Unitarian Universalists. In the front of this hymnal, I think for a lot of us, it feels like this hymnal is a stone, a sacred stone, where our 7 principles and our 6 sources reside. They're in the front there. Those 7 principles and 6 sources are part of the Article 2 bylaw of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And another bylaw that the UUA has is that if the board has not created a commission to review that Article 2 bylaw in 15 years, then we will. They will appoint a commission, we'll review it every 15 years, because the original crafters of that bylaw did not want anything that we say about ourselves to become creedal. I've heard people say, I believe the 7 principles, which is starting to get close to that creedalism. And the 7 principles were never intended to be a statement of what we believe, but it's that covenant of how we will be together. So, a new Article 2 study commission was appointed in 2020. They have been diligently working through the pandemic, meeting with people on Zoom, and more recently in person, gathering feedback from all kinds of folks about what is central to Unitarian Universalism, what's shared among us, how would we best articulate this right now? And they're allowed to scrap everything, and they did. Well, that's not true. That's not true. They didn't scrap everything. But there is a new draft. The 7 principles and 6 sources, as we have them now, were adopted in 1987. There may be hymnals in here that are a little older than that, where the 7th principle isn't listed, because that was adopted, I think, in that 1987 vote. So we've changed them before. And if you look at the different iterations of what Unitarians and Universalists have said they believe, what we said 100 years ago, you would look at that and go, yeah, no, that doesn't feel like us. So the board's charge to the commission that they created in 2020 was definitely an invitation for them to engage in a free and responsible search for ideas and language that best represents us. And yeah, whether or not it preserves the familiar structure and language. And the Article 2 Commission, they talked with clergy, they talked with individuals, they talked with congregational groups, they talked with youth and young adults, people who identify as UU but don't belong to a congregation, people who have left Unitarian Universalism because they have felt harmed by it. I'm sure there's others as well. And that iterative series of drafts that they've created led to a draft that was finally put out there were a whole series of Zoom feedback sessions in November. I feel remiss that I didn't advertise them to the congregation so that you all could have participated. I attended one of the final ones that was offered for liberal religious educators. And the commission is now taking all of the most recent feedback, creating their final draft that they will present to the board in January. There are people who are freaking out, I tell you, because the UUA is trying to take over congregations and tell them what to do, and no. The UUA is us. We elect the board, we elect the president, and before any of these changes happen, they will be presented at General Assembly for a vote by thousands of people. This will not just be, decreed by the UUA that these are our new, this is our new Article 2. So in the process, there will be a mini assembly in May of 2023, so just before our next General Assembly, where people can propose amendments. Any amendments that are adopted by the mini assembly then get presented to General Assembly. General Assembly will debate and discuss and vote, and whatever is passed in 2023, then kind of waits for a year of study and conversation. And then it's not until 2024 that a final vote to adopt it as our new bylaw will happen, and it needs to pass by a 2/3 majority. So there's a lot of feelings about it. The language is very different. The structure is very different. There are no numbered lists of principles, no bulleted list of sources. And I'm going to count myself among the people who were skeptical that it was necessary to jettison those lists and start fresh, because they're familiar to me. They're, I've worked hard to interpret them and live them, and They are a kind of a guidepost for me. But as I've sat with the draft and listened to others whom I respect say why they think it's an improvement, my willingness to open my heart and mind to a new way of describing ourselves is definitely growing. And I'll tell you one thing I love about the draft. It is based on 6 shared values, 7 really. Love is at the center. And Sarah, could you pull up the slide of this? And this will be in the bylaw as a diagram. It's image 1. There we go. So love is at the center, surrounded by sort of equally weighted values of justice, evolution, equity, generosity, interdependence, and pluralism. So still a short list, 7 values, with love at the core. That feels right to me. And I don't feel I can do the whole draft justice in a sermon-length presentation. I encourage you to learn more about it on your own. There is a link to the Article 2 Commission page in the Order of Service and Resources that's available online. You can Google UUA Article 2. The draft is changing, so I didn't link directly to the PDF but anyway, you can get to it from in there. And I plan to offer a 2nd-hour program about this, at least one, maybe more than one, once the sort of final draft that's going to the mini-assembly is available early in the new year. Now, one of the reasons that we have Article 2 and these, the principles or the values or whatever is so that we have something to guide us in our living and also in our faith development work. And I want to talk a little bit about the evolving models of faith development. Because as your Minister of Lifespan Faith Development, I had a great conversation with the Lifespan Faith Development leadership team a couple weeks ago, because honestly, I'm not sure what to do. We have families participating in different ways, in much lower numbers than we did. That was true even pre-COVID, that numbers were much lower. The Sunday school model comes out of a really different era. It started during the Industrial Revolution, the 1790s, and it started as it was offered first by a factory owner for the children who worked in the factory 6 days a week as a basic literacy and Christian education program. So that was the opportunity that children who were working had to learn to read and write. So families took advantage of it, and they made, Sunday school quickly became a part of family life. I forget the years because I'm terrible with years and dates, but kids were working, so 6 days a week. It was not until, I forget when, but somewhere between 1790 and 1870, that the first children's labor law reduced the number of hours children were allowed to work in a day to 12. So not a lot of time for school. But with the advent of compulsory public education nearly a century later, reading and writing moved to schools, and Sunday school's focus was more on Christian education, but the model of school was retained, and family participation in that remained very high. Church attendance was also much higher at that time. So in my conversation with the LFD leadership team, we talked about what should faith development look like now. If we were the sort of Article 2 study commission for faith development in our church, and we were starting from scratch using, our biggest imagination, what would we create to best serve children, because we do have children, families, we've got families, and adults who are not currently raising children. What would we offer to support their spiritual and religious well-being? Religious educator Connie Goodbread said, "Everything we do is faith development. Unitarian Universalism is all we teach, and the congregation is the curriculum." I think those are going to be our framing thoughts as we reconsider how do we best meet the needs of families and adults in 2022, 2032. The next 10 years is probably about as far ahead as we can even look, because things change. And I want to alert you that our board is also looking at our mission and ends, because we have a similar expectation of ourselves that we will be a living tradition, that our congregation will continue to reassess. Are we on the right path? Is what we said we wanted to do 10 years ago now still, does that still ring true? We can answer yes. Our current mission statement, which is on the front of the order of service, is connecting in love and service, growing spiritually, transforming ourselves in the world and the world. That was deliberately created to be the big picture, but we also have end statements about, more drilling down more. What does that look like in terms of what we do as a congregation? The board's going to be talking about this in worship in a couple of weeks, and you can expect that they will be talking to you in a whole variety of ways, like the Article 2 Commission did, getting your feedback about why does church matter to you now, and what do you feel called to do? What do we feel called to do as a congregation? I want to emphasize that we, because there's a lot of people sitting out here, and if we all get up and start running in different directions, we could hold up a parachute. That'd be good, but it's hard to move unless we identify some we projects. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to continue to talk about this in weeks to come, but thank you for going this far today.